Hi guys. How's it going? Hi guys. Wait a minute. I should get rid of that first. Okay. All right. We don't have an echo, so we're good. You guys can hear me still, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All good.
Um Mike Pruett founded mdroads.com as your one-stop source for all things Maryland roads, everything you needed to know, and a heck of a lot more that you didn't need to know, but you can learn about anyway. And his site has been going strong for what, about 20 years or so, something like that.
Yeah.
And
I think I stopped counting.
he is joining us tonight from their home in Maryland with his wife Laura, and the president and first lady of Maryland Roads are here to talk about their their that's a good one, right?
Yeah.
Their journeys to where they are today and their experiences with the road community. And I'm pleased to have them both here with me tonight. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, I guess I should start with Mike because he's the one who started the site to begin with.
Yeah.
On your page, you mentioned the date 1992 is when you really first started to get into exploring the Maryland highway system, starting to do research for it. And I'm wondering if you could take me through kind of like the embryonic stages of what you were doing as far as your research is concerned and how it ended up becoming a website.
Well, I was doing in 1992. Actually, I was at a community college taking course. I was taking some courses, and there was on one of the walls was a pull down, like an old pull down wall map for Maryland from probably it would have been like my guess is like around 1953. I looked on it and I saw there was like routes that weren't even there, no longer existed, routes that places that never even thought about even pre obviously pre interstate and all. Actually, my road geekdom I was back at like around age 12 or 13 when I finally got to see the stubs of the then under construction Fort McHenry Tunnel. So that it goes back a lot further than that, but that was my 92 was my first effort to like catalog all these old highways as they came along and take. I just basically I forgot about the class. I don't even know what the class was. I got an A in it, whatever it was. But, but in any case, the rest of the night, I did like a crib sheet of the routes and just saw that, you know, like there's small routes and with rather important numbers that were no longer there. And it's like where did these routes go? And that was like the really the basis of it. And whereas before, obviously, when I started to go online and everything, I discovered I discovered a lot of other websites, particularly Karumi's and Scott Kozel's site, and going into more of the freeway type history and the planning and all that. My initial focus was those lost highways because a lot of those were driven now and had more traffic on them now than they did as numbered routes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, and you mentioned that you go all the way back to the early days of like the 80s with the Fort McHenry Tunnel and seeing that built as a youngster. What was that like? Like what do you remember about that period? And I got to think that was a big part of what inspired you in general to see something that significant, taking shape in front of you.
yeah, I think it was also I was always even before that fascinated with maps, both nautical and highway. I used to be just seeing like bridges and tunnels being constructed and placed on there for that was also was also a big moment. But yeah, it was really cool just watching. You see, the stubs were already completed. It was like, and then it was like several years for the tube itself to be built. But just seeing this monstrosity here, not not in use. And the first one I thought was, what do they need another one for? But now I very much realize it's like you can't have enough of this. So
Yeah.
you can't have enough lanes. But of course I was 12 years old. So I thought it was really cool that it was there. And it's like it was also cool like seeing the other option was the Key Bridge, and my father worked as a contractor down at Sparrows Point, so we got to see that a lot. It was like strange. You had this bridge and on paper an interstate, but you had this long 2-lane elevated highway going through this industrial area, and that being kind of strange that didn't happen in most of the most in the rest of the country. So that was another really good thing.
What did your dad do?
He was a heavy equipment mechanic. He worked on slab haulers. They would haul the finished slabs from parts of the mill to storage lots throughout the rest of the plant. So he was one of the mechanics on these gigantic slab haulers with like 10-foot tall tires. So,
so he was one of the more important guys in the yard then.
Right. He was gone. Luckily he was retired before everything imploded there.
Yeah.
Like back in 2012. So he was a few years retired off the side of that, not working directly with Bethlehem Steel and the successor companies. So he luckily didn't have to face the brunt of all of that, but he was down there, and it was a really cool environment to see all the. It was also interesting spaghetti interchanges down in there too.
Yeah.
So that was from the war years, basically. So
these memories that you have of traveling these roads that you have a connection with, and seeing the old stuff and seeing stuff get built really triggered your interest. And obviously, I've known you for a little while, and I've known that you're a big map guy yourself. And so it's always interesting to talk with you about maps of the city of Baltimore, how the freeway system was drawn up, how the different iterations of what was proposed, and what ultimately.
There's 15 plans.
Yeah, right. And you could just have a field day just with those different iterations, versus what ended up becoming a reality. But so how did the website start? You just decided to put all of your research into a central location? Was that basically the gist of it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw other websites. Particularly, the first one I saw was Karumi, for Connecticut, and then I think there was another. I forget the guy in Ontario was another one. It was another really good one that I looked at, and it was just I just had an idea of I had the list of the routes in a file, but I didn't pull it out into a site with all the different pages and everything. Not until I think it was the late '90s, close to I think it was the '98. Okay, I'll just put it on there. '98.
It was '98.
It was '98.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad. I'm starting to get a little bit forgetful.
Well, it's a good thing you have a helper now.
Yeah. Yeah. She knows that. Anyway, it was just an idea that tell the story of these highways. And it wasn't necessarily just the freeways. It was these small country roads that are out there that nobody really knows about. So, but it's always been a point of mine just to do whatever I can to document that, and and that's where it all came from.
And what was that process like? Because I look at your catalog and I see that you've literally amassed every state highway in Maryland, including all the goofy 3-number lettered ones, they're all there, right? And I look at your body of work, which is fantastic, and the first thing that I say to myself is, where the heck do you start? Because obviously obviously you didn't get to where you are today overnight.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like when you started this, did you have like something else in mind, like a more limited vision of something that gradually became something huge, or did you really go into it headlong and said, yeah, I'm going to do all of Maryland and I don't care if it takes me 75 years to do it?
Well, I did. I started out with the ones that were existing now, and mainly just linking them up with linking on the basic information, the name of the road in each jurisdiction. It's usually more or less they stay the same, and then placing it in there, and then it was just after that going through and adding those, adding the decommissioned routes. I had several Maryland maps that I drew on. Drew on the decommissioned numbers and placed those, and then I just wanted to do it as a count, basically a count through of the routes, and just set it up that way, because then you could have there's a few routes that had a previous iteration, usually in a different part of the state. But then I found, when I was looking at the older maps, and I was seeing there was a pattern, particularly the numbers leading up to 300, prior to around the time they started decommissioning these, or around 1956, which would have been right about the time of the beginning of the Interstate Highway Act. Mm-hmm. So it was they were doing that. I think it was Harford County, 1953. I think was the first one that they started with, and they were trying to clear the deck of these routes to get things cleared out for. There was the interstates, and plus there were bypasses of several of the cities and towns that they were working on it also. So there's also the Frederick bypass, the Harrisburg Expressway. There's parts of today's I-270 that still had parts that were back to as far as 1950. So a lot of that was a lot of the reason that the large decommissionings and turning a lot of that stuff over to the counties was for purposes of building the getting things ready for these. Well, they weren't the interstates then, but they were the expressways and freeways and whatever else you want to call them.
So when Mike mentions about turning over to the county, it's because the state has a limited, and you can explain this better, but the state has a limit on how many miles it will cover.
Right. I think it's based on lane miles. Don't hold me to that, but they like to exchange. At least that's the practice today. They like to exchange a lot of those, and what seems to happen too is a lot of those suffixed routes that still exist. You'll find that they'll use one number for all the previous iterations of a route.
Yep.
You'll have see what's a good one,
648.
648 was the old part of Maryland too, between Baltimore and Annapolis, and then there's the part of 2 south of Annapolis was 778, and then the next county down was the 765, which still has some signed portions that are still usable, but there's a lot of, I think 765 they've used up A to Z on that.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stuff still in there to do.
Right. It's very fascinating because as Mike said, there's a lot of routes that you wouldn't expect to be in the state system that are much more. There's rural, suburban, and urban routes, but roads that aren't necessarily, they don't connect to important places.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to have some routes on the system. Here in Hartford County, for instance, we have 646 Prospect Road, which connects from 543 to 36. But is that really an important enough use to keep that in the system? So it's interesting that you'll have situations like Joppa Road, which is 5 lanes wide in Baltimore County and is a major commuter route, and
then prior to that, it was Maryland 148, and probably just 2 lanes.
Right, but so you have
it was dropped in pieces from the from the late 50s to the 80s.
Right. So you have this major road it's county maintained, that is not in the state system. But then you have these other roads that have a lot less significance. These 2-lane roads that are in the system.
I guess a good way to put it is there's more state mileage where nobody is than where anybody is.
Pretty much.
So the example I like to give is like I-83 north from Towson at the upper part of 695. You have the first exit. The first exit is Timonium Road, County Road. Very, very busy. The next exit, 17, is Padonia. The next exit up is that they just put in is Warren Road, which is unsigned 943. That's the only one that's signed, and that leads to an SHA facility there. And then the next one up is Shawan Road, which would have been part of the outer beltway for Baltimore. It was like one of the many proposed alignments that they had, and it's like this 6-lane from 83 over to York Road, which is Maryland 45, and those 4, county routes, and then you've got the next one up is Belfast Road, still a county route. Finally, exit 27. So after 13 miles, and you're up in the boondocks of Hereford, Maryland 137.
Yep.
You finally get a state route.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, 2 things that I'm noticing from YouTube going back and forth. One is that it's a hodgepodge that at times doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Correct, and we've seen state highway documentation that's not necessarily disclosed to the public, that where they've tried to reconcile this, and they said we don't really need these routes that don't have people. We want to take those out of the system.
Some of the counties are just saying no way.
And they're saying no way because they like that the state maintains those roads, but they don't have to.
It's like right here in Harford County, Maryland 924.
Yes, that's a very good
The plan was to drop that soon after they built the new alignment in 1988 and open that, and they were forced for whatever reason to keep it. So, whereas stuff in, say, Baltimore County, or even, like, another example is Montgomery County had like a huge exchange of routes that were taken off the system. They picked up one large, like 6-lane, that one 6-lane parkway there, and in exchange for that was a lot of smaller 2-lane roads, but they were, all of it were in large areas.
So it sounds like there's a lot of detective work involved here too, as far as establishing current alignments, establishing former alignments of the same route numbers, establishing former route numbers of the same alignments. It sounds like you could have a field day with that stuff in Maryland.
Yeah. Well, there's two main documents that I've used in the past. And the first one is what they call a the route alert list. It's part of the the highway information data sheet, which they have for each county, and in each county they have a route alert list, like what happens, the net result of each thing, like what's been added, what's been decommissioned, what's been put on, what's been shortened, what's been lengthened, any moves like that. Going further back before the 1970s, and it was kind of an overlap on some of these, is what was called the route transfer data sheets. And these are, like, some cases handwritten documents that there was one set of these for each county, and this was like the mother lode to, like, said what, like, some of the smaller routes that you couldn't tell on a map were like you could see a number pointing to a small little piece of line on a map. Now you had a name for it. So it's like that's still, I'm trying to get down to the gist of all that. But I do have like a main sheet, like a timeline data sheet, try to like combine all that stuff. Any additions, deletions, renamings, renumberings, all that stuff. It's just a crazy amount of stuff.
It is, and then
I'd like to go like some point and get it linked up to get it mobile friendly, A, and B, searchable by date, where you can see like a combination of all the actions on any particular route. That's where I want to go with it. But also, it's like I got to keep the old stuff up too, because that's some '90s nostalgia there.
Yeah. One other thing that didn't come up about the quirkiness of Maryland state highways are some that just end at an indeterminate point.
End of state maintenance at indeterminate point.
Yep.
And some of that goes back to when the state was buying up the private turnpikes.
Yes.
And that would have been like one number, one transaction, one number. And you have a lot of these even in areas that you wouldn't have thought were a turnpike or would have been subject to that. We still have those. That's a lot just to document that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So we've done plenty of work of going out in the field and actually looking for these small little signs that say begin and end state maintenance on the side of the road. And you can also sometimes tell too with the pavement change, or if there's concrete paving underneath, because there'll be a crack in the middle of the road.
Yeah. Well, there's other times where we just had one down in southern Frederick County. There's the town of Brunswick, and there's Route 79. I don't think I've even mentioned this on the site yet, but there was like half of that was truncated outside the limits of one of the towns there, and it was really strange because it was like from the center line of a stream going to its junction with Maryland 180. It was 100 feet short of that, so that the traffic light would have still been state maintained. And that's pretty recent. So I don't know why that was done. It's really, really strange. But then there's no pavement change or anything yet. But there's a begin and end state maintenance signs.
Yeah.
Wow. Laura, what's your story?
My story. So I was 3 years old when I found my grandmother's maps.
You're making me old. You're making me sound old. They say 3 years old when you found the site. That would have been scary.
I was 11 years old when I found his site.
Oh.
For people who don't know, we have a 15-year age gap. Most people don't realize that. So I was 3 years old. It was 1990. My grandmother had several ADC, Alexandria Drafting Company maps.
Yeah.
It used to be a mapping company.
That's like, they ended up in the same conglomerate as like Hagstrom and Arrow, and they ended up consolidating. But they were pretty much the local thing down in Maryland, D.C.
Yeah, so I found these maps in the bottom of this cabinet, and in particular, the ones I was most attracted to were Harford County, because I lived in Harford County, Baltimore County, city and county, and my grandparents' house was in Baltimore County, and then also Anne Arundel County, where BWI Airport is. So those were the three main ones that she had on top, and were the three that I that pulled out, and I was just so amazed and just fascinated with them. I actually taught myself how to read with those maps, and it kind of became almost like a little party trick when I was a kid, that somebody in my family would be like, Laura, tell me how do you get to the airport? And here I am, 5 years old, telling how to get from my grandmother's house to the airport accurately, when plenty of adults, would have had a much harder time. Yeah. So that interest in maps is like, that's what really got me started. And as I said, I found his website when I was 11 years old. So MD Roads and Scott Kozel's Roads to the Future were like my two favorite sites, mostly because of the Maryland emphasis. I've always been very much a Maryland road geek, primarily, with other states, where I have some knowledge here and there, but Maryland is like my bread and butter. So yeah, I remember just being, just so mesmerized, like, whoa, every single route in Maryland, this is incredible. But what's really interesting is I loved that you had the whole inventory, and I love that Scott Kozel has about all the highway projects and the highway wars, and it's very fascinating, and that really fascinated me. And it's funny because I now work in transportation planning and as an urban planner, and so it's honestly, I would say that coastal site was the one that really got me into, like, wow, there were communities that were going to be, they're going to be plowed through, and then they protested and they saved it. Wow, I want to like do more with that, in that realm of like of community development and transportation planning, and being interested in that. And then as I continue to grow up, I actually really enjoy, like, I loved, like, reading in the newspaper and seeing on the side of the road, like, the zoning notices for public meetings, and even ended up going to some. So I was just always very interested in the geography, the maps, and which was extremely useful when I first started driving. That I was so excited that I would finally get to see some of the places that I had been looking at on maps for the past 13 years. Now I was going to know what they finally looked like.
Yeah, I was kind of like that too. Now, ADC was part of my life too, and there's places like, particularly out in like Garrett County, I was like imagining them being these frosted crusted valley hollows, and they turned out to be a meadow. and of course, now I went in June, so. Like I was imagining this place to be like some kind of like frosty subarctic kind of place. It looks on the map, but it wasn't quite that way. So
right, So I've always had an interest in, and your site is obviously my favorite now. But I've always had an interest in the roads and in planning, and up until the point when I met Mike. That's a cool story too, how we met.
But we'll get to that.
We will. But really, I just loved that I felt like I could travel, even if I couldn't like get somewhere. Like, I actually had not been to St. Mary's County, Maryland, in fact, until 2010. But before that, it was like, I could kind of like visualize what these places are like. Somewhat, because again, you get inaccurate. Like, I expected St. Mary's City and Point Lookout to be a lot bigger than they were, but still, this idea of these like exotic places in the other side of the state that I could go to, and it's funny how I'd never been there yet. Could tell you that it has towns such as Charlotte Hall and Leonardtown, and they have Hollywood in California, and it's just funny that how much I managed to learn about the state that way.
Not to mention Charlotte Hall is one heck of an antique store and an Amish market. So,
yes, they do.
I want to get back to that antique store, definitely, because it had some really cool stuff. It was like cool old signs and stuff.
What I love about MD Roads then and now is that not only did you, on the more major routes, go by break down mile by mile what the intersections were, but you also gave your own commentary on like some of the places you had driven on, about even, I can't think of an example offhand, but I know that I remember there was one entry where you even talked about like the photography you had taken, and I took this picture and it was this kind of day, and I'm so glad that I got this picture, because then they decommissioned the route.
Yeah.
So it was just cool that I almost like I got to know your person. It's funny that I knew your name and knew your personality a little bit before I knew you. So
catching those indeterminate points.
Yes.
But that's interesting that you picked up on that. It's like he was adding his own personality and his own background and his own flavor, if you will, to what he was doing, rather than just presenting the facts, sterilized, here it is, here's what you got. Right. Mike was definitely interested in kind of giving you the personal scoop of things also.
Yep.
The map thing with the two of you is fascinating to me, because I'm like you, Laura. I became a lover of maps from a very young age myself, and we're only a year apart age-wise. And I think it was probably around the same time for me, like 3 or 4 years old, when I started reading maps. And I remember, like, as a 4 or 5-year-old, being able to tell my kindergarten teacher how I got from my house to Disney World, like give them actually like point-by-point directions. First step is you leave your driveway. You got to put that in there. You gotta say that because not everybody on the planet would know to leave their driveway first. So you gotta get that in there, right?
True.
But yeah, like I think it's interesting that you and I share that similarity as far as learning to navigate, learning to read. I think that's a big thing.
Yes.
I was certainly well ahead of most of my class from a reading level standpoint. I attribute a lot of it to that.
Yep.
So yeah, and the thing that I'm noticing as I get to know more of these people in the roads hobby is that they all have a similar story in that way. Like we all kind of loved maps as young kids. We all kind of were ahead of everybody else as far as navigation, and I used to think that I was the only guy who was that weird. But being a member of the community over the years has made me realize that there's way more people out there like me, and that's very comforting.
Yes, well, it's so funny because that was my first thought when my family first got America Online, and like one of the first things I decided to search for, which I think Yahoo was maybe the big search engine at that time. I don't remember.
That sounds right. It would have
but searching about Maryland roads and finding out that, oh my goodness, there's websites by people, and even though I wasn't active on MTR, miscellaneous.transport.roads, I would still read. I would lurk all of all the different posts that people made, and was like, wow, I'm not alone in the world. There's other people like me.
I was also a lurker on MTR, so I got to see that there's a whole nationwide curiosity, and it was back, that was part of the impetus, just everybody contributing about their own areas and their own areas of interest, and needed to do something for Maryland. So wanted to make sure that was all, that would all be documented.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think, again, like roughly when I started to discover the internet, certainly there were my own websites that I discovered, like roughly 2003-ish. Like Steve Anderson's work was very influential.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Who else? Alex Nitzman, especially with his Delaware stuff, because I'm a Delaware nut. So, stuff like that. I found, Doug's work and Steve Alpert's work. All these guys were really influential on me. And I think the thing that I realized going through this was that, wow, there are other people who like roads, and other people think it's cool to like roads. So, I guess it's really cool to like roads. You know what I mean? Like, you think that you're, again, we go back to the maps thing, right? Like, you think you're the only person who likes it because everybody else in your class is like, what the hell are you talking about? But
I remember getting I used to draw maps in my sixth grade. In my sixth grade class, that I remember a teacher grabbed it and took it away from me. It was like a full detailed, all the way around the Baltimore Beltway, and and everything else in there. I wish I had that now, but that was it goes back that far. Even if I didn't have any, I draw my own.
It's funny you bring that up. When I was in third grade, I remember my teacher, Ms. Akers, being like, well, now in class we're going to learn how to draw maps. And I got so excited, thinking, yes, I've been waiting for this. I thought we were going to make our own ADC maps. And really it was, a very elementary school version of, here, draw a line for a road, put a little house here, put a river here. Oh, you've made a map. So needless to say, I was very disappointed when I found out that we were not drafting. And so it's really cool. When I first started working with ArcGIS, I was like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and tell my 3-year-old self, you're going to get to do this one day. Yeah. Just wait. You'll get to make and manipulate maps.
Yeah, the website thing, and Laura, you were talking about how you're looking at these folks' websites and you're reading about the community side of highway projects, which is, I think, kind of, I don't know if it's unusual, but I think a lot of people who are in the hobby tend to focus on the roads, maybe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you picked up on the community side of it and took that and ran with that.
Yes.
And now that's kind of what you do for a living, sort of, right?
Exactly.
So I find that arc really interesting, that you took a different slant on it than I think a lot of other people would have.
Absolutely, and it's kind of interesting. I remember the exact moment. I actually took a history class, an elective, my junior year of undergrad. My undergrad degree is actually in English writing, but I took a history elective on Rise of the American City, and it was basically an undergrad version of like the history of city planning. And when I took it, I had this horrible realization that oh my God, I'm in the wrong major. What do I do? And I was like, they don't even have a major for this, but this is what I want to do. But at this point, I was a second semester junior, so I was like, all right, calm down, Laura. Writing is very important, no matter what you end up writing in the future. So obviously, I stuck with that. And then in late 2009, I started researching about grad school programs in urban planning. And then I found out that right here in Baltimore, Morgan State had a program. And so I immediately was like, yes, I'm going to go into that program one day. And I eventually did. And, but it's funny that arc how I got there. And what's even more, I guess, interesting is how so my career basically, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. So it's funny because I consider myself a multimodal enthusiast. Because even though I love roads, I acknowledge that there's definitely a place for roads in cities. You have to get goods and logistics. And I actually was a research assistant on a project in grad school regarding urban distribution centers and logistical freight villages. And so highways are really important, but then at the same time, that public transportation, transit, rail, buses, bikes, bike lanes, cycle tracks, and just even pedestrian facilities, like I just picked up a love for everything. And so I'm so excited I can't breathe.
It's okay, Laura, you can breathe whenever you're ready.
There you go.
Just going back to Dr. Santos's class, it was broken up very clearly by the modes of transportation. That the first arc had to do with colonial cities and development due to rivers, and then the railroad age with railroads, and then automotive age, yeah. I just really fell in love with the history and the planning behind how transportation is like a circulatory system for like the body. Like if the city is a body, then transportation is a circulatory system, and you really can't go without it. Mm-hmm. So career-wise in transportation planning, I was an intern and then worked as a transportation planner on the contracting side on Baltimore Link, which was the Maryland Transit Administration's bus network overhaul. And that happened in June 2017, but I worked on that from 2015 on. And so it's funny that in the same way that I get very nerdy about roads, I get very nerdy about bus lines and bus numbers, and this branch only runs, they only run this pattern like twice a day, and and actually have also, I've ridden most of the MTA Maryland system. So it's funny that the road, that the idea of clinching or driving on every single road ended up translating to buses, and then how awesome it was to engage with communities. And that was probably my most favorite part, is all the public outreach that we did. And basically, whether it was a planned, a meeting that the state had put on, or whether it was we went to community associations that invited us, and then even did pop-up events. But it was just so cool to actually talk to people in the community and ask them what routes do you use, and why do you use them, and how often do you ride, and what changes do you want to see. So it's really cool to have that community engagement side. And then even now, I work as a parking planner for the Parking Authority of Baltimore City. And it's funny because I even get now I almost have like memorized which blocks, especially since I help manage on-street parking, and we do a demand-based pricing study every 6 months in our downtown. That I've gotten to know, like, and memorize the patterns of, this 100 block of this street is like this at this time of day, but same deal. I love some of my favorite things to do are to go to community meetings, whether it's because they invite us because they have questions, or whether there's a project going on, what have you. So it's been really cool that even in parking planning, so that because of curb, that it fits in with all the other transportation systems because it involves managing the curb. So we added dedicated, but when MTA Maryland put in dedicated bus lanes in downtown, and just all this interagency work, because the road, you're dealing with cars driving on the road, you're dealing with buses and bus stops, you're dealing with bikes, and then you're also dealing with people parking on the curb, and so just how it all fits together.
Yeah. So you're dealing with, your job is parking planner, but you're dealing with all modes of travel. It's not just, automobile, single occupancy vehicle modes of travel.
Right.
And I think that's really important that people who are in the roads hobby have an understanding and an appreciation for those other modes. Obviously, we don't see them very much in rural areas. Heck, we don't really see them that much in suburban areas.
Yeah.
But I think that, yes, it's great that we all love the highways and we love driving our single occupancy cars and whatnot. But I think that if there's one thing that we really need to know a lot about, it's how these modes of travel interact with each other and how we do have to reserve space for all of them. And, especially, New York City has been on a bus lane binge lately. And, frankly, it has, it's been a big deal for Manhattan and the outer boroughs as well. And so we need to be finding ways to maximize the space that we have, because let's be honest, if we want to use Baltimore as an example, we're not going to be building 8-lane expressways through downtown anytime soon.
No, and I always chuckle when I see people that because they're on the AA Roads forum. There's like the fiction where you can the fictional highways board. And it always makes me chuckle when people say
link up 83 with 395. Just how
just plow the road through to connect them,
or bring I-97 straight up into downtown. And if you look new, like all the little nuances, you would know how that wouldn't be practical.
Right, and just how many, historic and wonderful communities that would be destroyed through that.
And so knowing that that's not going to happen, it's really incumbent on our planners and our engineers to look at the space and the lane capacity that we have on these major, whether they're highways or boulevards, avenues, what have you, and find ways to maximize the number of people per hour that can use them, because we're not going to be able to add lanes and we're not going to be able to add more cars, obviously.
Right.
So it's obviously a fine balancing act between all of these modes of transportation, and I'm sure you're seeing that, and that's obviously a pattern that's playing out in cities all across America, in fact.
Yeah. It'll be really fascinating to see how transportation planning changes in the post COVID-19 world.
Yeah, because, obviously in the city, public transit is most efficient as far as, number of vehicles versus the number of people you can fit on a vehicle.
Right.
That's always been the upsell.
Yeah.
It's always been like the thing they had going for it if you were trying to get the most number of people, to and from a certain place. And now that's not necessarily big upside now with if social distancing has to continue. It's just I think that's gonna have to be hammered out in the years to come, like how everybody's habits are going to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to be afraid, definitely, at first, to go back to using public transit. Mm-hmm. Like, what if one person gets on the bus and they can infect 60 people versus me just driving in my car? Mm-hmm. So I think it's definitely
there's already the individual. Most people are going to choose the single single passenger car just kind of by default, just because you don't have a schedule for that. It's just like the easiest thing in the world if you have a car.
Yeah, in fact, what's really interesting, something that I've learned that is that planning is often very political, and regarding public transit, that there's always this push for getting more people out of their cars into transit, but a lot of times that ends up coming at the expense of people to whom riding transit is not a choice. And that was one thing that came about in Baltimore Link that was very discouraging.
Explain Baltimore Link.
Well, yeah, I mentioned that it was the bus network overhaul in the greater Baltimore area.
Okay,
with Maryland. Yep. And so anyway, there was this huge push. We have to put in these suburb-to-suburb connections. And the suburb-to-suburb connections were not very... So my individual theory is that the reason why commuter buses work so well on the northeast side is because of the dollar savings with tolls because of the Fort McHenry Tunnel. Mm-hmm. And so you have that incentive that people aren't paying.
There's additional per day cost of using the tunnels and or using the toll lanes.
Right. If you're a Marylander with Easy Pass, it's $3 each way for the tunnel. Plus, if you use the express lanes, which the buses do, it's $1.54 each way. Right. So you're saving yourself $9. Yeah. And for the cost of. For like $4. Right. You're paying $4 instead of $9. Yeah. So anyway, there was this huge push, and the routes. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why they had issues. I think the big thing was that they tried pushing express routes without having a local route there first, because what a lot of the comments and people wanted was, I want to be able to go from Towson to White Marsh on the Joppa Road corridor. Instead, what ultimately ended up happening was there was an express line that went between Towson and White Marsh using I-695. So it didn't serve the people who needed it and wanted
people in between there were
the people right, the people would have been convenient to in between, and then there was no incentive to get the choice riders out of their cars. Mm-hmm. So it was very discouraging to see that there were lines that were not running, that ultimately we could have had buses going, say, every 15 minutes but instead that they're every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes because we have to save some of our resources for those suburban lines. So it's very frustrating to see the political side of, you have people in West and East Baltimore that are waiting longer for a bus that when they get on is then, overflowing and is standing room only. Yet we have to have these, this suburban connection, suburban to suburban express connection that isn't appealing enough to get the choice riders out of their cars.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's definitely a game of tug of war to some extent, I would think.
Yes. My hope is that there's a lot of paradigm shifts that I think we all want to happen post COVID-19. But the one that I'm really hoping for is the emphasis on the people who that are not choice riders, that are using public transit as their primary mode, and they're essential workers, and having more accommodating services for these essential workers like that may not necessarily work a traditional 9 to 5 shift.
Yeah. What's the single? I mean, I think you probably touched on this when we were talking about your typical, day-to-day job requirements. But what's the single most challenging part of what you do? Is it the community interaction part of it? Because I have to tell you, as an engineer, talking to other people is not a strong suit, at least not for me. So I try to leave that to other people. It's funny, like when I worked on the bridge for all those years, I actually thought in a lot of ways that was an easier job than working on some of the jobs that I did in the city, because there's just so much more community interaction in the city. And when you're out on a barge in the middle of the river, like it's just you and the guys you're working with. You don't have to take calls from people complaining about noise and dust and all that stuff. And so that's kind of my slant on it, and I wonder where you fall in that.
Yeah, so I really enjoy the community interaction. I think the most challenging part is when two things I would say is when you have when you have both sides that are very vocal, and like the we really want this or we really don't want this, that are very, very vocal about what they want to need, and people who that are very passionate about things that in the grander scheme don't seem like a big deal, but they are a big deal because it's in their neighborhood and they live there and deal with it every day. But then also another challenge is if there's something that I personally, or from like a planning perspective, think is a good idea, and the community thinks opposite, or vice versa. They think something is a good idea that I would say, no, it's not a good idea. So like, for instance, in Fells Point, which is a very popular historic waterfront community in east of downtown, there's a constant request from the businesses and residents to lower the parking meter prices. And from a parking perspective, that I would say, no, you don't want to lower the prices. You think that you're doing something good, like, oh yeah, we want to make it only $1 per hour and make it more accessible. But if the meters are $2 an hour and people are circling because there's no spots available, what do you think is going to happen if it's $1 an hour?
Yeah.
So it's very, so that's a very big challenge in trying to reconcile that and try and, help explain to a community, like, no, that sounds like a really good idea, but that's not what, I promise it's not what you want. It's going to backfire. Yeah. So those kinds of things can be challenging.
You two are very well versed, as we teased at the opening, with the planning of the freeways in Baltimore.
Yes.
Over the years. We now know the system of freeways that we got today is, in a lot of ways, very different from what was ever proposed.
Oh, yes.
And look, we know that there are definitely pros to that, I think, and there are cons to that.
Yeah. And
as lifelong residents of the region, I wonder where you guys fall in terms of the system that we have today versus the system we could have had, and how that might have been better for us and might have been worse for us. Where do you fall on some of those issues?
On the, let's say on the Baltimore freeway issue, I think overall where we ended up getting I-95 turned out to be the right answer, because it was the first plan was for a Fort McHenry bridge, like back. Of course, this is like right after the war, right after World War II, where we had you started having plans for things. It was going to be a harbor. All the tunnels were going to be bridges.
That was later, though. That was the 10-year plan. Yeah. The original plan was for the east-west, for it to be the east-west.
I'm talking about the harbor tunnel, though. The
harbor tunnel.
The harbor tunnel was the first one.
Okay, yes.
Right there, and then when they ended up doing a second tunnel at Fort McHenry, that would have been that was to be, of course, to be preferred to anything with the 10D. Or the only thing is, I wish somehow they have some kind of, I don't know if we'd have like a full length on the East-West Expressway that would have been like further, like would have been further north, to possibly link into I-70. I just think they would have, if they had just gone and not begin parts of the freeway until you have the rest approved. But I had, I think, in terms of where they were planning to plow I-95 through residential areas, that wouldn't have worked at all. That would have been absolutely horrible. And in the end, putting it in industrial areas where they needed the nearby truck service and be near to the marine terminals, it ended up being the right choice. Just, I don't know if it kind of just backed into it or that's just kind of where it ended up, but I kind of like in that what we got with that. What I would have liked to have had is some better connection from the west. I don't know how it would have worked with I-70. I would have seen maybe some kind of tunnel under the park, or some kind of connection. Maybe not even a full freeway, but just something where you wouldn't have to like jog down onto I-95 and increase the pressure on that. The pressure on that artery.
Yeah, I mean, the west side unfortunately we basically got the worst. We got the worst of both worlds. We got destroyed neighborhoods and a highway to nowhere. So
yeah.
That section that got built was like literally in every plan.
From Robert Moses in 1943 on.
Right.
Yep.
So basically, World War II on, it was like even. The first one I saw was like 1944. It was like literally like months before D-Day. They were already planning the destruction of the Franklin-Mulberry corridor.
Yep. And unfortunately, Robert Moses was very upfront and said it was because of slum clearance. Mm-hmm. And so the ultimate result is that for 30 years, 32 years really, from the mid 40s to the mid 70s, you had these plans. Is the highway going to go through? Is it not going to go through? If it does, is it going to cut through this area? Is it going to go around this area? But either way, you had 30 years of people living in these communities not knowing what's going to happen. Mm-hmm.
You couldn't sell it because it was like it had this hammer sitting over it with condemnation.
Yeah, so
the word was out that was like, hey, this is where it's gonna be. You're not gonna be able to do anything with it. So it's like it became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So the section that got built, what we call the highway to nowhere, was a section of I-70 that got built west of downtown, mm-hmm. And then for like 1.4 miles long. So by the time that they actually started the construction there, which they ultimately did, so part of why this took so long was there was a lot of hold up with litigation. There were a few things going on. So you had some hold ups with what alignment you wanted to put through. If you were going to go straight through the Rosemont neighborhood, or if you're going to go around the neighborhood, and then also with going through Gwynns Falls and Leakin Parks.
There was also a cemetery there.
Yes, too. There was a cemetery near Rosemont, and so you had a lot of things tied up in litigation. But then ultimately, in 1975, I think it was 1975, was when it was ruled that they could go ahead and build that piece because it predated environmental impact statements. So because
as time went on, the requirements for environmental impact increased.
Yes.
So those laws got stiffer, but that, I guess, it got grandfathered in.
So the sad reality is, we look at it now and say, why would they build this huge section of highway without any guarantee? The sad reality is it was really, the neighborhoods were really deteriorated by then. Yeah. And it was, so at that point, the highway had already won. Yeah. So building it, like the damage had been done, so to speak. Like, you're not really plowing through a neighborhoods anymore because the people are gone.
Yeah, so, it wasn't at that point like a thriving community like certain other cases you had around the country where like you had neighborhoods, you had good neighborhoods that were plowed under, and just because they were, communities of color and just didn't have political connections, and that was where they wanted to put a lot of these. Just they put it through the path of least resistance, and that happened just about everywhere.
Yeah.
But you got something here where you got situations here where you had the black neighborhoods near I-170, and then you had the white neighborhoods of Fells Point, and where I-95 was going to go through. And it turned out that that's what happened.
So that was
to unite white and black against the road.
Correct. So that's what's really fascinating too. Historically, is how you had two different movements. On the west side, you had the African American communities. On the east side, you had the middle class white communities, and they ended up joining forces to say, "Hey, this is going to negatively impact all of us." And having that extra, community organizing of a whole sections of the city coming together against the highways really made a big difference. So as I was saying, we got the worst of both worlds in that if there was anything I would change, I guess at this point, because you already have the highway to nowhere, if there was a way you could just tunnel under the rest or something, because Edmondson Avenue is US 40 on the west side, and it's pretty bumper to bumper during rush hour, because that became your de facto I-70.
So US 40 through Baltimore City is 55 traffic lights.
Wow.
So
yeah,
that was all later engineered by originally traffic signals engineered by Henry Barnes.
Yeah.
Came from New York City, or went to New York City after he did Baltimore. I don't know which was before or after.
Right.
I guess he was like the Robert Moses of traffic signals.
Yeah.
But a lot of the knock I have on Baltimore City traffic signals is there's no loops or anything. It's all strictly on time. So that really it gets frustrating a lot to sit at a red light and there's a green light for virtually nobody.
Yeah.
So and that happens a lot there, and it's it's one of the things, like, if in a perfect world we get Baltimore City back into time signals next time, like there's ever an update with automation there.
Yeah.
Because that would make things a lot easier to do, a lot easier to drive.
Yeah, and I think that the Baltimore Red Line project, which was unfortunately canceled by Governor Hogan in 2015, it was going to be a light rail line that on the west side pretty much followed where I-70 would have been built.
Yeah, it would have gone along that.
It would have gone straight through that in the middle of Highway to Nowhere to downtown, and so it was just extra upsetting because that project almost seemed like a middle ground way to get people that on that side of town, a lot of them who primarily use transit, not by choice, to and from downtown and to and from job centers faster. But unfortunately, that was canceled, and so now 5 years later, instead of building a light rail, we still have more of the same: a half-built highway, no light rail. Just it's almost like it's unfortunate that without a good way to get to the west side, whether with a highway or with light rail, whatever, that those neighborhoods. They're
on a wither now. I feel sorry for anybody who bought into it was called the Uplands. It was going to be a new development. A lot of people did buy, and it was marketed as going to be on the Red Line, and now that's gone. So that's pretty much obviously the sales.
I don't think they've
went to the dumper. They haven't
built a house, I think, since June 25th.
I think it's maybe like 1/3 used. It was going to be like kind of be similar. It was not quite like fully new urbanist, but like it was going to be like not as far spaced out as not as wide open as like your average suburban cul-de-sacs or anything like that. But it would have been. Yeah, that was the main selling point, was it's close to downtown, and it would have been it's going to be on the Red Line, and now there's nothing. So these people who bought there are going to be left holding the bag.
Yeah, basically there's a really great I don't know what the word is, organization, foundation, but it's called Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, and they do this BNIA. They do every year these like vital signs, and it's really cool. Is that is that they map out how long the average commute takes from any part of Baltimore, from people, like how long their commutes take from people living in Baltimore City. And the unfortunate reality is that on the west side, because there's no highway and there's no like light rail or any other kind of like, project, transportation movement, that they have the longest and worst commutes. Yeah. So that's what I would change, is that there needs to be something on the west side. And I don't know how you would do it. And I know, and the other reason why, obviously the unfortunate reason on the west side was going to be the slum clearance. But in the original Robert Moses plans, he wanted the east-west highway to pretty much go along the Route 40 corridor, which actually makes sense on the east side because you have a lot of industrial over there. Yeah. So that part of it would have made sense. Yeah. To put through.
That's part of why you have like Moravia Road is kind of strange where it is there, and then that would have continued east into there would have been another connection into Baltimore County, which that's why there's like several why the east side of I-695 is very, very kinky there. Yeah. It's because you ended up with like there's two or three compromised alignments there that were like kind of just mishmashed together. Yeah. In the late 60s, early 70s, and you went with what was built, and that's why you kind of have this big 90-degree turn into exit 37 on 695, because that would have been it there.
Yeah, I think that would have been cool if the windless highway had been built. I would vote for that. I would vote for.
It would have been neat. It would have served an important need, because there's there are roads that go into it, but you wouldn't have needed to go onto 95. You'd go north onto that, or go on Eastern Avenue around 150 going into Baltimore City, which that would have been very congested too as you enter the city. There's like significant traffic lights that there's some traffic lights where it's basically one lane or it's none. If you got somebody on the left turning left and then a bus sitting there stopped, you've got 0 lanes. So yeah. So I mean, it would have been good to have another facility for that.
It would have relieved a lot of the pressure on the east side of Baltimore City, where the express toll lanes ultimately got built.
Yeah. Now they did end up building Boston Street as like a 4-lane divided into the eastern part of Fells Point and goes through Canton along the waterfront, and that takes care of some of that. The only problem is they built their large bridge on O'Donnell Street, which is the large elevated bridge over the rail yards that are on the east side. But Boston Street, unfortunately, goes back to 2 lanes and is a level grade railroad crossing with frequent trains coming in and out of that yard. So you've got to go back and forth with those. The I-95 link up with Boston Street has remnants of the old, what would have been the I-83 interchange link in there, and it's out there also is a large truck stop. So that's kind of everything's kind of accommodating to the trucks out there, and there's parts of it. It lines with but all this stuff lines up with Boston Street, and then it becomes. Of course, they got really creative with this. They called it Interstate Avenue, and it curls up to the next interchange with O'Donnell Street, and you can get right on 95 North from there. But it's that was another thing too. Was what was all this stuff for? Seeing some of that, and that was part of what I saw back in age 12. The other thing kind of like that was finally getting to the west side finally getting over to the west side, and the old ADC map had a cloverleaf interchange over there as like some kind of proposal, and then finally getting over there at like age 13, and looking and seeing these ramps under construction and saying, that's not a cloverleaf.
For I-795. Yeah.
It turned out they did not. They canceled everything inside the Beltway and it would have like. I think it would have gone into like Wabash Avenue in Northwest Baltimore, and you see there's kind of you look at Google Earth, you can see that Wabash is kind of overpowered, like 6 lanes, not really connecting to anything, and that's what it would have been.
Yes.
It would have been like the inner part, that inner like boulevard part of what 795 would have gone into.
I think that they should have built that too. The 795
that would have
into
been cool
the city.
that would have been cool to have.
I think not just the cool to have factor,
It would have
but
been good. It takes a lot of the.
it takes a long time to go up Reisterstown Road.
Yeah.
If to get through that part of the city.
All that traffic out of Northwest and of Carroll County and Westminster and all that comes down and has to go all the way down to I-95 and joins that stuff that can't get on I-70 either.
Right.
So you have
a lot more people that
you have two arterials that they're forced onto 95 with.
You have a lot of people, you're right, that are forced onto 83. So from 795 to 695 north to 83 south.
Yeah, it depends on where you are in town.
Right. So all the people from the Northwest, because it's very, very slow. 140 is much slower than that Maryland 140 is much slower than US 40.
Yeah.
Just as far as the all the lights and
yeah. Well, it's also like 140 comes right into the northwest corner, so those untimed traffic lights those timed traffic lights like begin at a very like far point out there.
But I think we brought up something that's a really important point, is that even though these highways didn't get built, the traffic had to go somewhere. Mm. So instead, it went onto Wabash, like on the Reisterstown Road, and you have Wabash Avenue, you have Boston Street, you have more traffic on 40, and
mm-hmm.
so
you can't really track just how much goes where. You can't really quantify it, but you just know as a whole, all that traffic increased and went to distribute.
And a dirty little secret too, though, that a lot of people don't want. So there's a lot of proposals that come up regarding daylighting the Jones Falls Expressway, I-83, inside 695, and it sounds all nice and wonderful to let's just take it all the way up to Northern Parkway. But unfortunately, now that traffic has to go somewhere, and it's going to go through these neighborhoods. And part of why we have the lower part of the highway south of Penn Station and Guilford Street is because the traffic dumping off of 83 to go through Mount Vernon
mm-hmm.
was a huge mess. So that's why you had the viaduct that was built a little later than the rest of...
Mm-hmm. It seems like it's only a small connector, but then it's very important in terms of getting it through that one neighborhood. It's
definitely because Guilford Avenue. If you didn't have the viaduct there, and Guilford Avenue, there's no way that would have been able to handle. And then
now they're talking about the smaller version of that is talking about like removing 83 from south of Guilford Avenue down and replacing it with
a boulevard, which
I
think makes sense.
With a boulevard, I guess would have been an extension of President Street. Take it up north.
Which I think makes sense because a lot of time you're pretty much at a standstill on the viaduct anyway. So what's the difference if you're at a standstill on an interstate or at a standstill because of a traffic light?
Yeah.
So, but the quality of life factor. Mm. So that doesn't.
There's not anybody living in those areas now. That's
correct.
already been.
It's already been.
That's actually been the old Jones Falls was in that area. So there was always a floodplain. It would have been like early industrial, early mills, and like small factories, warehouses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You would have had the rail lines would have gone through there too. So you had warehouses owned by some of the railroad lines that were in that area. So you had no native, they had nobody living there, living there in a residential area.
Yeah.
But like right now, it's kind of scary when you come around that last corner for Fayette Street. You go into the Route 40 viaduct, and you're making that left turn, and it's like that could come up pretty quick if there's a backup there, and you're not looking or paying attention. Or, there's a lot of other stuff around, and I mean you can, and it's also. I guess they don't mark it slippery when wet, but I'm sure that happens too.
Yeah. But yeah, so you have the whole environmental quality of life factor of if you take the highway completely out, and then instead your neighborhood is not going to be as pleasurable to walk or ride a bike in.
Well, you might want to go somewhere. It's like a mile between Guilford Avenue and Fayette Street, and Pleasant Street, which is your next two ramps. You have some choice if you have a few. You can put a few signals in there, and you can make a left on Monument or Madison, and that's a big outlet too. It's like another safety valve for US 40. US 40 has the full viaduct over 83, and Madison and Monument serve as your pair going east-west. Goes directly past Johns Hopkins Hospital, and then goes like a couple miles to the east, merges back into the US 40. So it's like part of that. Those two are an additional part of that safety. They're kind of the two workhorses besides US 40, which seems to be under construction for like various things just about all the time. Yep. Particularly around Orleans Street out to where it merges into Pulaski Highway and actually becomes Pulaski Highway right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that as we go through like all the different schemes of the city's highway system, and obviously we know that access to downtown from the west is probably the single missing link that's needed the most. I think we can agree with that. And we all, of course, have our own opinions on things. We have our favorite unbuilt renderings of things. I mean, I can tell you from going through my years of research of Maryland and Baltimore, by the way, being one of my favorite cities because it's the stub capital of America as far as freeways go. I really would have liked to have seen a Fells Point tunnel.
Yes,
I think that would have been really cool. But
so that's ultimately my understanding, and I'm always still researching. One of these days, I'm just going to write up a whole history of the highway wars and planning of Baltimore. I'm going to do it one of these days. But as far as I understand, that's ultimately what the agreed upon alternative was okay. We're not really technically. We're not going to cancel the highway. We're just only going to approve if there is a Fells Point tunnel. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, because then just kind of got canceled by default because the resources just weren't there to even try and think about any kind of realistic construction. Yeah. But Fells Point tunnel would have been really cool. I think that actually so. Had it been built at the time, I mean, Canton has seen a bit of a renaissance. So, the Boston Street corridor has a lot of housing on it that it didn't before on the waterfront. Mm-hmm.
At the time it would have all been industrial.
It all would have been industrial, but yeah, I think it would have been great if they could have done the Fells Point tunnel and then hooked in to Boston Street over. I think that actually would have been very workable. And
I just think overall, I guess there's like some reason when a lot of times, not necessarily here, but a lot of places, it seems to be America is a lot more allergic to tunnels in terms of like the cost and all that. Like there seems to be this aversion that other countries don't have, and it's like a very convenient thing to have when you don't have the space. And I guess given our taxation, revenue, toll system, the way we allocate money here in the U.S., it just doesn't really work out. It doesn't end up really being feasible unless it's like part of something that's a toll facility. It's just not, you don't see too much of it, too much of it elsewhere, where there's a lot of cases where it would really be good to, like, it could solve a lot of issues.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, tunneling is obviously an art that has more or less been perfected over in Europe as far as putting facilities in urban areas. And, yeah, that's just not what we do in America for whatever reason. And you know, you wonder if at one of these points we're gonna get to a point where we actually know how to do that stuff well.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of toll facilities, you guys are the president and first lady of Maryland, and I want to talk to you guys about the Bay Bridge.
Okay.
And we were talking about stubs in Baltimore, and one of the things that was tossed about was a bridge over the bay connecting more or less Baltimore with the Eastern Shore more directly. But, you know, every once in a while, you know, you hear, concepts about, should a third bridge be built down by Annapolis? Should a new bridge be built elsewhere? We know that I believe the eastbound bridge is coming up for a major deck replacement in the next few years. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. It could be the westbound one. I'm not sure. But so we know that these bridges are getting up there in age. We know that we have to add lanes of capacity regardless to trans-bay travel, because what we have right now just doesn't work. And I wouldn't be surprised if when the second bridge opened in the early 70s it didn't work then either. So as you guys are very analytical in the way you look at things, how do you see all of this playing out, and what do you think is the best option in the long term? Like, where is all of this going, do you think?
Well, right now I think the political consensus is just on the third span at the existing site. Now right now the work is being done right now on the westbound span, or it was up until it was supposed to be during this past off season. And then there was like a spat about like the amount of time that's needed to do that. Now there have been, in addition to the third span, there's also been one up near Baltimore, and then there's also been concepts down in southern Maryland, which I don't know how that wouldn't be too feasible in terms of like you probably all the environmental hoops that you'd have to pass to get down there with like Blackwater Wildlife Refuge and all the swamps down on the Eastern Shore, plus the length of the span.
Yeah.
Although that would be maybe like way down the line, say 2100, there might be something there. It would be very convenient to a lot of the commuters coming from Washington, and a lot of that growth from Washington is coming down into southern Maryland or Maryland 4. A lot of that would be a relief valve to a lot of that's coming from that southern part of Washington, or coming from the southern part of the Washington Metro. You also have it where it's like there's nothing like you'd have also the 301 Harry Nice Bridge coming up too. You'd have to come across there because there's nothing from the Bay Bridge all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
Right. Yeah.
Now the main one is the one I'd like to see one day is the one like up in my area around Essex and Middle River across to Kent County.
Yes, that is what I also would love to see.
I wanted to get the other one out of the way first. But yeah, there were two different plans, and that's part of the reason you ended up with that current Maryland 702.
Yes,
that was going to be one of the alignments. It was going to be one of the possible alignments for the outer Beltway, but it was also one of the possible approaches for the western approach to the Bay Bridge was going to come across there. The other plan was to go from the current 695, go across what's called Hart and Miller Island, which is where it used to be Hart Island and Miller Island, but now it's hyphenated, and it's like where they did dredge disposal for the digging of Baltimore's shipping channels, and this is where they put the spoilage, and it's now a state park on the outside of that. But that would have been like that would have been one of the alignments to go from roughly exit 42 of 695 in Sparrows Point and go east across the eastern part of the island and then over into Kent County, like over the bay using that. The problem I think has been basically Kent County NIMBYism. There's only, I think, 16,000 people in Kent County, fewer than in Garrett, which is in the far west of the state, and they want to stay that way.
Yeah. So I get giddy. So talking about fictional highways, and people are just so people that want to connect 83 or 395. What's wrong with them? And yet here I am being like getting all fictional about, if we built the third bridge across the Kent County, we could do a whole exercise on building a brand new type of city, and this is how we could do it. And we could build a city that's that like from the get-go you're not allowed to own a car. What would that look like? And then have to just what if we designed a city that bikes were the main. So it's funny that I get into this like fictional fantasy land mode, thinking about like what I would want to do if I could like build the bridge there. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, Kent County is a very rural county, and it's rural because of the fact that it's just far enough out of the Baltimore and Wilmington, metro areas that it's like just too far enough. That it's not really desirable to live that far out.
It's not really connectable to any of the major metros, but it's the thing I've noticed, like going to the marinas and the like docks of the rivers on the eastern shore in that part. Most of the tags you see are Pennsylvania plates, so you have people coming in, like I guess people coming in, like have their boats there and like coming up from Philadelphia or elsewhere in PA, this is kind of their like little, I guess it's like their vacation homes. Are we shutting them out? Are we shutting them out with checkpoints from COVID? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't think we're doing anything like that. But
yeah, so this is where, Laura, planner, fantasy of thinking about like what roads we could build in Kent County without even like thinking about the fact that these people like the fact that it's a rural county and that you can't get anywhere quickly. And that they're not suburbanized, that they don't have, that in a lot of cases, these places almost, if you could compare a picture to 100 years ago to now, a lot of it would still look the same. As far as, what buildings are in like the small towns and stuff. So
the county map would probably still work. Just add a little piece of 301 on the east end of it. And you got lots of old concrete roads built by the state back in the 30s that are still there now, and a lot of that wouldn't be there if you'd had it modernized. But also, I think in terms of the bridge, it would be like if you did build it, it would be fully bringing Kent County into the Baltimore metro.
Oh, it definitely would. Could you
imagine? Right now it's like kind of like in this outer world of like Wilmington / Philly by extension. Just like Cecil County is by putting the tolls up. You kind of block that off from your own state and own market too. Yeah. I think technically Cecil is a Ravens market, but
you see
more Phillies and Eagles up there than anything, and on the upper eastern shore, even on the lower eastern shore, you see lots of Philadelphia stuff.
So regarding that fictional third span to Kent, now this is where it does get a little highway geeky for me. Yeah. Is I would like to see it go from Sparrows Point across Hart Miller Island over, solely because there used to be 2 Maryland 20s.
Yes.
That both ended.
That's correct. The Eastern Maryland 20 is still there over in Kent County. The original Maryland 20 was Old North Point Road, which led from basically from US 40 down to Fort Howard, which was the site of the battle in the British invasion in the War of 1812.
And wasn't there a ferry at some point that connected the two?
Well, it went to Tolchester. Actually, Tolchester is the end of Maryland 21, which is a small, which is a little bit further. That's a little further up from Rock Hall. I'm sure there might have been something that connected them, but I don't think there was ever a full-blown 20 to 20 connection. In the this would have probably predated SHA and its the State Roads Commission, which was its predecessor.
Yeah.
Which I think it was like in 1970. They got to be more comprehensive with being not just roads but highways, and then now it's subsidiary of MDOT, which is the whole Department of Transportation. So.
Ooh. Mike, if we were to build our imaginal bridge and put in our fictional, what highways would you change in Kent County to line up with that bridge? And would you change any of them? Would you do any bypasses?
I don't know if you do. The original plan was to go to what they had was like a plan to get it to US 301, and it was just a kind of a right angle interchange. I don't know what you would do after that because it was just kind of up there, but. I don't think that part was never really planned out,
right?
Beyond 301, but that would have, I think somehow you would have gone down you may have gone down towards 213, and I don't know what that would have looked like, but that would have been an option, or head straight over to Dover somehow, possibly along like Maryland 300.
Oh yeah, the Baltimore-Dover connection. Yeah. That's another thing but we haven't really thought about.
So it's an odd thing. Like US 31 is in the NHS, the National Highway System, and then oddly, Maryland 300 is, and then what is it on the other side of them? Delaware 8, I think. Or 8 or 10. It's one of those.
I think it's 8, but don't quote me on that.
But no, 8's coming out of Maridale. It's got to be 10, or it's got to be 10 or 12. It's. Whatever it is, it's like just because it's the direct link to Dover, that's the only reason it's in there.
Okay.
So it's the idea that look at Dover, it's like the least connected state capital. You look at it, it's all the you got 13 is north south. You've got Delaware 1, which is north south, kind of bypassing it to the east, and then there's nothing to the west except 2-lane roads.
Yeah.
We're taking your questions for Mike and Laura. If you have them, leave them in the live chat, and we'll do the best we can to address them. The engineer in me looks at a map of Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay region and says, well, D.C. and Annapolis have an easy bridge over to the Eastern Shore, but I don't see one for Baltimore, and I wonder why that is. I mean, obviously there's a reason and there's a history behind that, but a Baltimore to Eastern Shore direct link would make a lot of sense.
It would.
Just when you think about it, because I don't know what the percentage is of traffic coming from D.C. to the Bay Bridge and versus coming from Baltimore to the Bay Bridge.
That would be good. That would just be good to know. Overall, today's technology, you'd have something where it'd be great if you had that data and have it anonymized, just so you could use it, just where people are going to and from. The other option is like if you had if you didn't have Aberdeen Proving Ground, you could do something through the Harford County to like the northwestern part of Kent. Up there, it's the bay is only 4 or 5 miles wide. For the Chesapeake crossing, and not 10 further down. Although if that was an issue, but
Delaware out of their entry next to tolls.
Yeah. 95. Yeah. But obviously, if say. Let's just say the Army turned over, let's say they turned over parts of Aberdeen Proving Ground, and you could do that. I mean, they did it with, we saw it with El Paso. A lot of that's all, the Intermountain Highway was Fort Bliss property, so it's not unprecedented.
Yep.
You can see some straight road through the straight road through there, and I don't know what exactly that would look like, but it might go to a less NIMBYistic portion, less resistant part of Kent County. Yeah. There might be
maybe like Chestertown.
Yeah, I mean Chestertown is on the other side. But I'm talking about I'm talking about from Betterton in the north down between Betterton and Tolchester.
Oh, okay.
So somewhere in there, like the thinnest part of the bay, where it's kind of like at that point it's already kind of going northeast, and come across that, and it's only like 4 or 5 miles wide.
Yeah, because looking at it and thinking about what would work, I mean, and this is again the engineer in me thinking out loud, but you know, I always imagine something that takes off from 702 and jumps across the bay, lands in Kent County, and then steers a course for US 50, where from the end of the bridge down to US 50 you have no exits. So you eliminate the sprawl concern from Kent County. You basically feed all that traffic that's entering the bridge down onto 50, which is where it wants to go anyway.
Yeah.
You could also spit it out on the Maryland 404.
Oh,
going eastbound. That's also for the Delaware beaches. That's
right.
And that's one they've just dualized. You know, for all the way from Y Mills over to Denton, and that's always had significant like accident fatality problems.
Yeah.
So that would be another option is if you get that into there, or maybe go into possibly some kind of connector from 301 down to Denton. That would be another possible connection to kind of distribute some of that traffic. But I can see if you go down from there to from the bridge to Y Mills, you could hook into Maryland 213. A lot of that would work well because there's no south of 301 there's no development there. 301 they've been building the last 5 years built an interchange at Maryland 304, which is right outside of Centerville, which is off of that exit is the state police barracks and I believe a county dispatch center. So it's kind of like a center of like county like emergency operations and all that. And they have 301 has some significant like site issues, and it's everything's so straight, and it's just kind of, I guess it's just like it can cause people to be fatigued and not looking, and so you have like a lot of the intersections that don't have interchanges, you're starting to see Michigan lefts going on to. So like 313 further north in Maryland 544. So you're starting to see they've got the money there for interchanges on there. So the next one, that's the next significant one that doesn't have anything, is Maryland 305, which is just slightly up north of 304. But it is I wouldn't be surprised if that there's a piece of that like extends a mile or two east of 301, and then it just ends at a four-way intersection in front of somebody's farmhouse. End of state maintenance at indeterminate point. I would be surprised if that got lopped off if they needed some mileage.
Yeah.
So, but there's just tons of space out there. Now, I think of it this way: I'm looking out and not thinking about like the difference between the two states. You look at Delaware, and it's like it's not going everywhere, but it's like there's a lot of sprawl everywhere. There's like economic activity going on. There's signs of population growth and people wanting to be there. When you come to the Maryland side of the border, it's like a museum. You see lots of old abandoned farmhouses, lots of old roads and alignments, which is good for us. But at the same time, you've got like a lot of it's not being developed, and you might luck out that there's not really a lot of people there. That you're going to have fewer people as time goes on, fewer people that'll resist that. Yeah. That's the kind of upside to that.
Right. You bring up sprawl. That's something else I think that's going to change post COVID-19. Is that, and I've been saying this for a while because I thought that online ordering and Amazon was going to do this, but I really think that the pandemic will probably do this too, that the pendulum is going to swing more back to like these traditional in some cases into single family, or even if not single family, hopefully a mix of single family and multifamily. But either way, like a single residential use instead of having mixed use developments, because unfortunately a lot of the businesses may not be here. But also too that I had said that it would probably swing, because if you can buy almost anything from Amazon, then why would you need to live near Main Street if you can order everything? But so I think that's something that's going to change. I hope that it changes to where you have a diversity of housing, that it's not just single family on this side and multifamily on that side. I hope there's a mix, but I think we're going to see more sprawling development in the future.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't have like the full-blown like minimum lot sizes that you have in a lot of short-sighted developments.
Right.
But it won't come fully like that. There's got to be kind of a pushback that in terms of like you're not going to want to live cheek by jowl anymore.
Yeah, and hopefully too you'll have a lot more connectivity. That's something else that I often explain to people here in Hartford County is a suburban county. Well, it's a suburban county in like the lower 2/3 and the upper third, and then on the east side is pretty rural. So it's very interesting because a lot of people are like, "Oh, the traffic is terrible," but it's so terrible because none of the suburbs connect to each other. So everybody's just dumped onto onto Maryland 22, for instance, or 543 or whatever roads. So my hope would be that from a transportation perspective, that maybe we would get more, that there would be, if there is, if we do swing back to sprawl, that we end up with more connectivity between, these suburbs, and that anything new that's being built is connected into the existing. Yeah. So that you don't have this strain where everybody's being dumped onto the state highways.
Yeah. I feel like we could spend hours and hours, well into the night, just batting around, alignments for the Bay Bridge, batting around alignments of unbuilt Baltimore freeways and whatnot. But let's get into some user questions here real quick. And I have one here. I'm not going to repeat what the question is. I'm just going to kind of give you a synopsis of the subject matter. Can you please explain to us what the heck Maryland 856 is?
856 is the old loop of Maryland 298. It's one of those Kent County concrete loops. So it's in, I guess the whole area would be, the town would be Wharton, I think is where it would be. But it's in central Kent County. But anyway, it's if you look at Maryland 298 and 561, just to the east of that, it's a concrete loop, and you can see it if you look in in satellite view. You can see it there, and it's like basically it was a straightening out of a dead man's curve, and to this day, it's still on the books.
Yeah.
It literally looks like state highway, but it's public property. But it's something kind of strange just to Kent County in the Eastern Shore. They used to have these kind of roads with, like, I guess it was about like 6 foot wide concrete and then some asphalt shoulders on the sides of it. And then on you've got some like that on this side of the bay. You have the opposite. You have nice wide asphalt, and then the shoulders were concrete, about a foot or two wide. So I could show some of those too. I should probably pepper my pages with some of that stuff.
We should. That's my dream. I don't know if that's a question or not.
I do a lot of it with OpenStreetCam and Mapillary, and I capture a lot of that stuff. I'd like to be able to put that into get that into photos just on our own.
My dream for an MDO, I would say, is to really, especially now that we've explored so much more in depth these all these different alignments and all these and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to. We should really go more in depth on entries, but I'd love to add more of like the planning perspective, especially as I said, it's on my list of things to do is to write out like the full. I'm gonna do like a full blown history.
Yeah, there's a lot more I can get into in terms of like when things were added and dropped. Now that we have like with those data sheets that now has like where the specific the meeting, the date of the meeting, where it was, and where the minutes would be found of the meeting, where they dropped or added these routes. So you could really drill down to that. So
another thing I'd like to do is to do something where you'd have the Road Geek where we like point out like the different regions of the state where like the Road Geek must see.
Yeah.
Roads
let's break it down into regions. And well, I try not to be Baltimore centric, although it seems I kind of fall into that groove a lot. But get it for other parts of the state too. But.
Yeah.
Killer's Opinion wants to know the next road trip Mike and Laura will make is.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. We haven't even thought about it.
I haven't thought of it either. It's like I've been wanting to get the Eastern Shore. I haven't done any of that in a while. I just want to see, like, definitely. Well, we got to see the new. The last thing we did was the new toll 301 in Delaware. So.
Did you paid the toll?
Yeah.
Actually, one time I think I went like the month before when it was last week. It was free. It was just me then.
Yeah.
And then we did one later. We got Lorraine clinched on it too.
Yeah, she's on there too. No, it's like she was actually born on one of those on a house on one of those former 648s.
She was, yes.
So, anyway.
So my question, we're teasing it right now, but we'll circle back to that in a second. But how did you meet? Who wants to take a shot at telling that story?
You go with this one because she's like she knows this all by heart. But
I love telling the story. So yes, when we were that doesn't sound nearly as exciting though. Just saying we were coworkers.
That's the basis of the whole thing.
Yeah. So Mike and I used to work for a company called the Shepherd's Guide. It was like a Christian Yellow Page company. And
I was a graphic designer, and she was in sales.
Yes. And I'd gotten the job after I graduated. We were still in the recession, so I was happy to find something that was $10 an hour, and was like, woo, yeah, I'm on it. And basically, the first day that I got to the office, it was a small office. There were about 12 people that worked there, and our coworker, who was really like the accountant and HR person, she took me around and introduced me to everyone. And went back into back in the graphic design room, and pointed out where your desk was, and was like, "Oh, this is where Mike sits, but he's off today. He'll be in tomorrow." And I didn't, okay, great. So, but as we're walking around, something caught my eye. Was that I started seeing empty road stickers around the office. I was seeing them on corner on somebody stuck one on the side of a monitor, and then another one was on a little pencil jar. And so I decided to ask. I was like, "Hey, Judy, what's the deal with all these, empty road stickers around the office?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, remember that coworker I said was not here today? He has a website about roads or something." And I just I didn't freak out like that because I was still trying to be very reserved because it's my first day of the job. I still I lit up he's Mike Pruett.
You found him.
And when I lit up, my supervisor French started laughing. It was like, wow, I didn't realize that anybody actually read his website that didn't know him. So at this point, he was like, all right, Laura, you have to do something really crazy and over the top when he comes in tomorrow. And here I am. It's my first day. I'm like, what? What? I'm like, okay, sure, whatever you say. And he was like, you should, I don't know, get on your knees and say, Mike Pruett, you're my hero or something. So the next day, February 2nd, 2010, I started my shift at 8:30. At 9 o'clock, this guy walks in that I don't recognize. So I was like, oh, that must be him. I'm glad it was. So I go up to you and I get on my knees and I'm like, Mike Pruett, you're my hero. And you just turned bright red. And everyone, we're all laughing.
Right now, aren't I?
Everyone is laughing. I'm laughing. Everyone's laughing. And then your manager kind of gets upset because she thought we were making fun of you. And she was like, he's keeping you on the down low, but he's seeing someone. And we were like, oh, okay. But it was funny because Brett was all like, oh my God, the two of you should get married. And I was like, whoa. Just met this guy. But you really couldn't say it was love at first sight. Even though we did, even though we didn't officially date till after we both had left the Shepherd's Guide. Just didn't want to deal with any, romantic politics in a small office. Yeah. It was basically clear from the get-go that it was an instant, we were instant best friends forever. And we would, spend our lunch breaks together, and anytime that you would go to the kitchen, I would just have to go get a glass of water. Yeah. And then March 20th was the first time we took a road trip together, we drove out to Frederick County. Yep. And we drove through the city of Frederick, and also north of there, and the park. What's the park's name? I'm drawing a blank.
Roddy Mills. I think it was Roddy Mills. It was one of the covered bridges. There's 3 covered bridges left in Maryland. All 3 of them in Frederick County.
Yes, but where was the Overlook? That's a park.
Oh, Gambril's Overlook.
Yes,
okay.
Gambril's.
Okay, no, I was talking about the covered. Think of the covered bridge was up north. You were saying up there, right? We came back down to Gambrill State Park.
Yes. To Gambrill State Park. And so, after that, it was pretty much, it was instant that, we're definitely going to do more road trips together. And it was funny because we're actually coming up on the 10th anniversary of the 2010 Baltimore meet, which was April 17th. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in the office and being like, hey, Mike, are you going to,
at this point, I just got on Facebook, and it's like, here's a meet, and it's going to be 3 miles from my house at the time. So right. I got to go to that.
Right, and I had not been to any meets prior because they weren't, they either weren't close by, or I was just kind of like, I don't know if I want to go to one of these by myself. I don't know. But basically, it was like, well, if you're going, I'm going. Then you're going, I'm going. So we pretty much, right then and there, we were like, that was where we first got involved with the greater meeting everyone and befriending so many of you awesome geeks.
Yeah, it was kind of cool too. It was like in a restaurant I'd been to several times before. And it's hard to believe that it's like that whole shop, that whole area where that happened is that's 20 years old now. Yeah. And of course, in my mind, it's still brand new, but it's like, oh, guys, 1998 was 20 years ago for them.
22 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's like at the time. But they had 20th anniversary stickers up.
If MD Roads were a person, it could buy alcohol.
Make it walk the white line.
So it really all started from there, and you are now married?
Yes.
We're
married. We had a Road Geek themed wedding. Road Geek travel themed wedding.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful daughter.
Yes, it was not here tonight. My mom actually has her because I have to go into the office tomorrow, so didn't want to leave her with Mike by himself while he also has to work. So
I know she's learning how to crawl. She's starting to be she's starting to be a handful now.
I'm sure that'll begin. It won't be long. It'll be like, won't be long. She'll learn how to talk, and then eventually be like, Mom, no. And it won't be long. She'll be like embarrassed to be around us. And, can you tell me off around the corner?
I think that picture of me holding her, she's gonna hate me in 16 years for that picture.
Oh no!
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll see.
I hope she's good. She's nice and pretty. She's pretty quiet and calm, and I hope she stays that way. But
she's a really pleasant baby.
Yeah. She's very good. She's not hasn't given us any big problems yet. So.
Yeah.
But you guys have gone from being professionals to, you're both road geeks. You are now a couple. You're now parents. And the journey is obviously, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but I'm sure the journey has been unreal, and it's been amazingly satisfying for the two of you. And as you look at each of those profiles, professional, road geek, husband and wife, mother and father, what are you most proud of all of that?
Of all of that? Oh, it's hard. Well, for me, it's easy to say being a mom and my daughter, but it's hard to if we put the sentimental aside of, it's actually really, really hard to pick one because everything is so meshed together that even Lorraine's, a lot of her firsts are also, are and will be road geek related things. So it's, her first time to New York was when we came up to your place and did the, that one Saturday, and did the, Ocean Drive.
That was Ocean Drive, yeah.
Yeah, and so her first times in New Jersey and New York were road geek related, and so it's everything it's so meshed together. It's hard to just pick one thing. I mean, I'm proud of all of those roles, and I'm really proud of the fact that work doesn't feel like work to me, and being a parent doesn't feel like work to me because it all just feels wonderful in the sense of being able to do something with transportation, turning my hobby into some sort of career, in a way part of my career, and then also having our closest friends also be in the same hobby, and I'm really happy everything has come out the way that it has. But of course, giving birth was amazing.
Yeah.
And I could say all the, all the stereotypical things of you won't understand till you're a parent, and you just are in love with them, and it's true. She's definitely Mike and Rainey, that's her nickname. They're definitely the highlights. But still, I think I'm really proud of all of those roles and all of those things.
Same. Yeah, I think same. I mean, I'm glad of all the, all the different roles and everything, but Daddy's going to be the biggest one. Once she gets a little bit bigger, she's already getting personality and everything, and it's all cool to watch and everything. And it'd be cool when she gets to go on trips with us, and all this world isn't so crazy anymore, and it goes whatever way it does. But it would be good to.
We've learned a lot of that. Yeah, we've learned. It's funny. We've been learning as we go along, how to road trip with, how to road trip with kid.
I never thought of seeing those books where it's the travel guides, and then you see the ones like whatever place with kids. You never thought of that before. Now it's you kind of do, but then it's I don't know how good that'll be.
But it's funny. I could almost write. I should write a blog post, if not multiple, about how to take road trips with a kid. And my main point of advice would be to stop as little as possible and line it up with when they need to stop.
Yeah.
It's never one time we were out.
Yeah, you never plan the unplanned pit stops.
Right. No, one time we decided to eat out while she was asleep, and then of course as soon as we get back in the car, drive down the road.
Yeah. Try to line up. You should try to line it up.
Yeah, you should definitely line those things up.
But at the time we were in Hagerstown.
Oh yeah.
Oh Lord.
I heard
Yeah, it
about
must
that
have been
one,
the most sketchy sheets in history.
Yeah.
It was on
Yeah.
about 40 east of Hagerstown.
That is something else a map does not tell you. Is it does not looking at a map doesn't necessarily give you.
I was thinking like all you need to get a diaper change, and it's like I'm looking on the side of this wall of there's sheets, and there's like 10 old video cameras from like the 1990s, early 2000s on there, and I'm looking at like people are like looking back and forth like. We must have just pulled into an open air drug market. We did. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't think we should go here. I think we should go violate the one way, go back up the way we came.
I mean, we lived, for many years in Baltimore City, and I've been in every neighborhood in Baltimore City at least once, and I've never seen an open air drug market like that. But we found out later, after the fact, that Hagerstown and that spot is did
that even have a gas station attached? I don't think it did.
Did it? I don't remember.
I think it's those older sheets, like the older convenience stores that didn't have. They weren't like shacked up at the gas station.
I thought there was, but
it's like
I don't remember.
Yeah, but we safely got to another one, but it's like I never thought of it that way, and I'm thinking I gotta watch out for your safety and everything.
Yeah,
and that's just kind of having the third eye in the back of your head sometimes, and just being aware of that. So
yeah,
the things that the map can't tell you sometimes, but that's probably the only reason it sticks out is that's the only time it ever happened. So
yes,
but. It's funny now. It's funny now that we're out here.
Right, but definitely at the time it was like all these people are staring at us.
Yeah.
Why are they staring at us?
Yeah, so you gotta be careful. We gotta be careful where to stop.
Yeah.
No, like CP's got he always stops at there's this one off of 63 to the west of town, and he always gets off of that one, and it's like so far off. It's so far off the road that you don't even think about it. But there's nothing else around this to worry about. So that's you should stick to that one now on. But you love gotta love the sheets. Wish we had more of them sometimes. So.
I think we could. Keep on going for many hours at a time, but I think we're going to wrap this up right here. And I just want to say to the two of you that I thank you very much for your time tonight. And you guys have done an extraordinary job of chronicling all of everything that there is to know about the state of Maryland and Maryland roads and all that stuff. And I cannot wait to see what you guys have coming in the pipeline in the years to come. And I cannot wait to see you guys grow additionally as a couple and as parents, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you both in those roles in the years to come as well.
Yeah.
But
thank you so much. This was a really great opportunity. I'm so glad you had us on.
Well, it was my pleasure, and look, and I really think this is a good time to get all of us road people on camera and make them explain themselves about what the hell they're doing in this hobby in the first place. So I think you guys have done a good job of selling your case tonight. But I thank you both very much. This was a lot of fun to do, and I hope you'll come back sometime. And I hope you'll have a baby with you next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe next time she'll be able to tell you what her favorite road is.
Well, maybe. You never know at the rate she's going. Yeah. But anyway, thank you all very much, both Mike and Laura, and also to all of you in the live chat who are keeping us company. mdroads.com is their website. Thank you for joining us, and we will again start the cycle brand new tomorrow with another week of the coronavirus and the commute afternoon live drive, and that'll be our entertainment Monday to Friday. On Saturday, April 18th, we will have the San Diego webinar, and who knows what the heck I'm going to do on next Sunday a week from today, but I'm sure I'll come up with something. So that's where we're headed for the next week. Thank you again very much for watching. Thank you very much again for doing this, you guys. And we will see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your Easter, enjoy the rest of your night, and enjoy your week ahead.
Thank you so much. You
All right,
too.
thank you.
Bye.